Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Help me keep those likes higher than the dislikes. Only you can help me do that. But over to the point. I stumbled across a video by OmarIsuf, the shaman philosopher of YouTube fitness, in which he discussed why he thinks 2019 is now the best year for gaining muscle and strength. And I'm going to largely agree with some of what he said there. Some of it I'm going to disagree with because I think there's a lot of bad information and misinformation out there, especially on the nutrition side. I think with the rise of flexible dieting, veganism becoming more popular, that's actually hurting people's gains. All of that nonsense needs to go. But over to the other points he made, he talked about we know a lot more about gaining muscle, gaining strength. People are knocking down records. And I will agree with him. I don't think it's due to new substances being created. You see that in the bodybuilding world, but even that's largely subsided. What you're seeing even in the bodybuilding world is people just using more and more and more and more and more. It's not uncommon now for an NPC guy trying to get a pro card to use 5 times or 6 times or 10 times as much stuff as a Mr. Olympia used to use, right? That's just the norm. And we do see some of that in the strength world. When you look at some of these all-time powerlifting records, like you talked about Julius Maddox, look, we know based upon the research that size equals strength, okay? This is so clear that anyone who is in denial that hypertrophy is the biggest key to gaining strength, if you're in denial of that, you're too ignorant to even have an opinion anymore. The evidence is so overwhelming that it's not even in question. Well, a lot of these guys are willing to just bulk fatter and push the limits. They're willing to use more gear. They're willing to get fatter because, again, getting fatter will help put more tissue protein on you, give you better leverages. That's why we see things like the bench going down or going up. It's that combination. But we also are seeing more and more genetics jump into strength. And I mean, a perfect example, like he brought up Kaylor Woolham. Well, I mean, there's a perfect example. We come back over, what do we know about strength now? We understand the importance of body composition. Right, you've seen powerlifting and strength sports, a lot of them in other weight classes, guys are lean. You don't have guys at 25% body fat trying to compete at the world level in weight class stuff. It's super heavies, yeah. But down in the lower weight classes and middle weight classes, guys are getting lean because they know that muscle, not fat, is the key. Right? You need to be the most stacked, leanest guy in your weight class. Ideally, the shortest guy in your weight class. Right? Which means you probably need to diet down. If you're not the shortest guy in your weight class, you need to drop a weight class and diet down. You need to diet the fat down and get down real lean, drop weight class. Well, Kaylor's an example of a guy who's maximized body composition and he has a massive genetic freak advantage on the deadlift. Because when you look at Kaylor's other lifts, you look at his squat versus his deadlift and we realize it's not just muscle and strength because his lower body isn't proportionately as strong as most people who deadlift 200 less pounds than him. Because his squatting is good. Like his squatting is national level good, but you wouldn't look at Kaylor's squat for his weight class and go, that's a world-class level guy. Because it's not there. And the squat's what determines what your real strength and muscle is in your lower body. And he's got a good bench press. Got a good bench press. Not ultra world-class level. But he's got this phenomenal deadlift. People say, well, why? He has really, really long arms. Okay, the deadlift is a shorter pull out of the hardest part of the exercise for him than for most people. So what Kaylor has done, he has realized he's got long arms. He's perfected his leverages. On the deadlift because he's got freak genetics for the deadlift. He's perfected his stance and movement pattern to utilize his arms to his advantage, and then he's built all the muscles maximally, all the back muscles basically, his whole posterior chain. His entire posterior chain is overdeveloped so that he can create the most force possible because size equals strength while utilizing his long arms to his advantage, to his leverage advantage. And it's given him a freak deadlift. He's got a freak deadlift. And that's why. But again, genetics, body composition, all of those things. For everyone else, it would be different. People who didn't have his arms to deadlift would be totally different. They wouldn't be able to pull that off. He wouldn't be able to. But he uses what he has and says, hey, I know I've got this genetic advantage. Let me approach it intelligently. and maximize it. And he's successfully done so. And you have to give credit for that because he knows what he's doing. So that's exactly what you see there. But let's come over to the other points. Why is it the best time to gain muscle? Because we have tons of data. The data is available. We know, based upon everything we've seen in the training world out there, look, as far as maximizing strength goes, we know guys who run the conjugate method, and all of the material that came out of that has produced world-class level athletes. That carries over to powerlifting. Most of your best coaches out there use some form of the material that came out of that. We know upper-lower splits are ideal. Okay. We know that the strongest powerlifters are the most jacked powerlifters. We also know from all the data that size equals strength. We have tons of data on what maximizes muscle hypertrophy now. Therefore, it's easier to get jacked because there's less confusion. If you just avoid all the bro bodybuilding stuff and avoid the bro split stuff, it's actually really easy to get big now. People say, what do you mean? Because we know frequencies tend to be each muscle group twice a week. In some cases, you can go higher, but for general purposes, guys who are just trying to get jacked, each muscle twice a week usually works best on an upper-lower, like 4-day split, which is what most elite athletes use. I vary from that right now, but I have reasons for doing so. And I wouldn't recommend it to most of you. I don't do that to my clients. My coaching clients run what we know works. All right? We know that high volume of training within your maximum recoverable volume is what produces the most muscle growth. Okay, we know that. We know that. So when we understand the frequency end of that, we understand the programming end of that, we understand the need for volume and maximum jactitude, a lot of the confusion has disappeared. It's actually a lot easier to even construct basic programs and not get it wrong because we have that data to work with. In other words, if you look at all the accumulation of data we have right now, and someone just wants to grow, they know that a 4-day-a-week upper-lower split with large amounts of training volume within their recoverable volume probably going to get them there. We know a lot more about periodization now. It's a lot easier to get data on periodization. We know what works and what doesn't work. Okay. A lot of this mystery has been removed. It's actually really easy to get jacked. And let's come back over how does that apply to strength. You need to be jacked to be strong. Size equals strength. And it's made things to where they're different. The standards are different now. Standards are different now. I mean, a perfect example, he talked about, you're seeing like big lifts that were crazy in the past are normal now. It's normal to see a 180-pound guy in a gym now who can deadlift 500. Commercial gyms. We know more about training. Let's just use me as a perfect example. How many guys in their 40s lift what I lift, and I don't have good genetics? People have pointed out that I have the worst genetics in YouTube fitness. Yet I'm about to be 43. I can squat over 500. I can deadlift 600. Right? Our training knowledge has come further. And I'm a guy with what people call bad genetics. Yet I can do those things in my 40s. A lot of you guys, I'm the age of your dad. And I do it without injuries because our training knowledge has increased. Where people with average genetics can deadlift 600 pounds in their 40s if they just train smart, right? I'm a great example of that. I have good genetics. Yet I'm doing that because our body of knowledge has increased. The downside is going to be is that when people ignore the science and go to the other stuff. We know, for example, when it talks about nutrition, so we need to talk about this nutrition time. No, we don't. You need to get people eating more animal foods. Okay, that's what the data shows. We know the data is overwhelming. They're the most anabolic foods in the world because study after study after study looking at muscle protein synthesis. We know the foods like whole milk, whole eggs, right? We know these foods are what stack the most muscle on you. We know this. This is not a controversial statement. But then you'll see all the goofy fitness stuff. Oh, do our vegan diet. Do our intermittent fasting diet. Even though we know intermittent fasting, even training fasted, burns less body fat. Right? We know this. This is not subject to debate. You will gain less muscle and burn less fat messing with fasted training and stuff. We know this. That's not a controversial statement. The experts all agree on that. Yet we see people pushing this, and instead of nutrient-dense foods, instead of whole milk, let's eat Pop-Tarts. Okay, so you have the goofiness, the bad nutrition info out there. And that's the thing I would argue with him. No, we don't know more about nutrition. The nutrition information is really bad. It's really bad right now because it's such a pollution of silly nonsense. Instead of saying, hey, we should be eating whole foods with a heavy animal food basis with eating plenty of vegetables to make sure that we get all of our micronutrients, right? Instead, we've got, intermittent fasting, flexible dieting, veganism, okay? That stuff is killing people's gains. All of those things are hurting people's gains. You're going to need to double the amount of drugs you use to get gains if you start messing with a lot of that stuff. But hey, people are willing to do that, so they get away with it and they can market it. But you guys who are natural, you might want to avoid all those things. Not going to be in your best interest. So that's the one I'm going to disagree with him on. I think the training knowledge has improved phenomenally. The nutrition knowledge, because everyone ignores the science. They ignore the science to go with bullshit. They ignore it, and therefore I don't think we've improved there in general. Because it's so polluted with nonsense. I mean, those three things are perfect examples. This stuff that nobody should be doing who cares about gains. Yet they get hyped up anyways by sometimes supposed evidence-based people. So I'll disagree there. Training, though, we have a phenomenal amount of information now. We know it works. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.